but it's a nice segue into one of the two articles I think we're going to spend most of the time talking about in this sort of off week. And this one, you shared with me, and as I was reading it, I was almost yelling at my phone because I was having it read it out to me,
Uh,
with my arguing back with it because it's such a controversial um, piece, and the article is titled "The Zero Click Internet." And why don't you tee it up, and then I'm really curious what you thought of it, if you agree with it or not.
yeah. This guy, Josh Tyler, he is a startup guy. He's a founder, and he took this controversial opinion last month on X. Basically, this long, sprawling, ranty thread, basically talking about what he's calling the zero-click internet. And whether you agree with it or not, I think it's an interesting phrase to reflect the idea that we are increasingly going into specific platforms and then expecting all of our answers to be within that one platform that we are using, and that you are not even going to search for new answers or click out for new answers. You are going to stay within a specific chosen ecosystem, whether that be Facebook or X or your enterprise application platform of choice, as we've just described with like ServiceNow, Salesforce, Workday. So the real fight is increasingly, according to this idea, the idea that you will be stuck in a specific platform or a specific ecosystem and just never leave. And frankly, we're starting to see between some consolidation in the platform space, as well as some consolidation in ecosystems, such as the Apple ecosystem. It is harder in some cases to leave these platforms and ecosystems. And I also think that, so to some extent, this is happening. And then with the emergence of generative AI, it becomes easier to ask questions within a platform and expect the platform to be reaching out to the rest of the world. But on the other hand, I would say that we still are looking for choice to some extent. So I'll start there and pass it over to you.
So yeah, so well, I think the important part, I would say there's two points to this article, right? So calling it the zero click internet, and the first is a an observation which I think is difficult to argue with, but then his analysis of where that leads. And so, as he says, or as you said, that this idea is that you now predominantly, I think, through Gen AI, you have this aggregated environment in which Google or your Perplexity, whatever it is you're using now, it's not actually doing a search in the way we historically thought about it, where you get the series of links and you go and click through. It's going to go and effectively read or surface that information and present it to you. Um, and in his mind, what that then translates to is then there are no clicks. You just get the information within that platform. And to your point, whether that platform is a social media platform or Perplexity or Google itself, that you're not clicking on anything. And that therefore that then dooms massive chunks of the internet sector, right? So he rattles them off. It's the end of digital publishers. It's the end of the domains and domain management companies like GoDaddy. It's the end of web hosting. It's the end of advertising business or internet advertising. It's the end of SEO. It's the end, and he goes on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where I struggle. So I am living proof of this model, right? I won't say I don't do any traditional searches anymore, but it's very rare. I
Mm-hmm.
use a handful of different AI tools, and I surface everything I need by starting by putting that question into Perplexity, or I use an open source one as well, and it gives me a response. And I think here's where the reason I take umbrage with this, and I disagree with some of the fundamental principles. That approach, I do it because it is so much more effective and so much faster. I can type in free text the question that I'm actually trying to answer. It interprets what I'm saying. It does the searches for me, often multiple searches. It reads through the web pages to surface the answer and gives me a summary of what those are. And if I'm simply looking for simple facts, which a lot of times it is, I'm just curious about something. It's like, who's in the cast of this movie or whatever. Well, yeah, okay. I don't need to go any further. But the reality is, I never would have. I mean, I might have clicked through to find that information, but I wasn't going to stay any time on that site. And if you were paying a Google link for that, then you just waste your money anyway, because I'm not buying anything. I'm not there long enough to watch any advertising. It was just a simple collection. And in the case where it's something more than that, well, then what am I doing is I'm using it to surface the stuff that's actually useful, and Perplexity and pretty much all of them now will annotate and say, okay, I got this reference from this piece, and so it helps me like instantly sort through. And then what do? I click through and I go and read it. And I think for anything that requires more than that simple fact, where there's analysis, there's opinion, there's subjective anything to it, I don't see any of this going away. What I do think, so web design, no. Do I expect that we're not going to have websites? No, I don't think any of that's true. I think we're going to still see independent content. I do think SEO is going to be at risk. I think it's going to be. I think we even talked about this AI optimization, right? I think that's
Mhm.
going to be a thing. But I really just, well, put it this way. I really hope not, because it will be a very shallow world, and I think that's the sort of doomsday scenario he's sort of painting here. Um, and I just don't think people will stand for it, frankly.
Yeah, I'm torn on this because on the one hand, I do think that generative AI is going to replace what we call like Google first page results. It's just as easy to search in Perplexity and get a starting point for what you're looking for. I still think there's a space for, call it the competitive market of ideas. What you do when you have an actual search and then you are looking through a set of results. And part of the challenge there is that, frankly, Google has crippled that capability right now. Because when you do a search right now in Google, your first six results are just ads that are not really the most relevant results. And so that's one of the things that Google has to think about, that they have over engineered their search engine for ads. And frankly, so have the social media networks like X and Facebook. Like every third or fourth post you see is an ad rather than what you're actually looking for. So part of that is just a challenge that these legacy platforms have all over engineered to simply become engines of commerce that don't really serve the advertiser, the vendor advertiser, or the user. The term Cory Doctorow calls enshittification of platforms, where platforms go from supporting the user to supporting the buyer to supporting the pure engine of financial transactions. That is a challenge that generative AI is solving. But this zero click internet idea that this means we are going to wipe out websites, we're going to wipe out hosting environments, we are going to wipe out choice. I think that goes a step too far and more speaks to a competitive opportunity that exists for information.
I mean, I think there's a couple of question marks here that, and again, I get a little frustrated with this sort of ranting, because it's not really kind of trying to take a balanced, nuanced approach to it. The first is that all this is only really possible in any meaningful way through generative AI, and generative AI is still incredibly prone to hallucinations. And maybe at some point in the future, it will get to the point where it's good enough that we can truly trust it. But right now, other than me asking some random thing like who's in the cast of a movie that it really doesn't make any difference, in which I can pretty much instantly validate, because almost always I'm just trying, because I'm old and I can't remember someone's name. It's like, beyond that, you're always going to click through to see who the authoritative source. And if you're not, well, frankly, you're being foolish. So we're nowhere near that point right now. The second thing is there is massive money involved. I mean, he rightfully points out that each of these industries are multi-billion dollar industries, and these multi-billion dollar industries are not going to go down without a fight. And a massive amount of the content that is generated out there, the reason there's a big giant market for ads is because most of it is produced and supported some kind of commercial activity. It's companies that we follow that are producing blogs, and they're producing content because they're trying to attract eyeballs. It's individuals who are trying to put their ideas out there, like you said, the marketplace for ideas, because they're trying to promote their own brand or their book. There's a whole lot of interest out there in having this. And if nobody can get access to my information because the AI simply consumes it and and homogenizes and nobody clicks through, then guess what? I'm going to stop producing it, and then they're going to have nothing to scrape, nothing to point to, and no one's going to use it, right? It's a symbiotic environment that just
Mhm.
doesn't lend itself to this sort of dystopian kind of world that he's painting here. So I think the bigger question is and like I said, that's why I broke this into two parts. The first part is true. The observation that we are seeing a fundamental shift in how people seek and perform at least that initial consumption of information is dramatically changing.
Mhm.
And the question is, what will that then lead to? How will that then evolve or cause things to evolve? And I will say the one little part for me that is already changing is that, I was actually, as I was reading through this, and like I said, arguing with my computer as I was reading it, um, I was thinking about the show, right? Well, what do we do on the show? We post links to articles that we consume. What is interesting is I would say 80% of those articles are now fed to me because I am subscribing to newsletters that I'm relying on to surface that
Mhm.
information. So one of my big takeaways is that the newsletter, ironically enough, the good old fashioned email becomes, has a sort of resurgence in importance because of this, because it allows people to bypass the filter. So, I think it's gonna be this interesting time, but yeah, I'm not buying into this sort of view.
I think it's a half and half thing. There's definitely going to be activity where we stop using some of these traditional services and replace it with generative AI. And we've talked about Chegg already, being that educational service that is replacing by generative AI. But also things like Getty Images. How much do you need stock images when generative AI will often produce the same level of stock image quality? Some of that is really going to disappear. But those are niche industries, and I think a lot of this worry about replacing graphic designers en masse with generative AI. That's happening right now to some extent, but I think that there's going to be a whiplash when people realize the quality that is available and the flexibility that is available for generative AI is not as great as CEOs who want to get rid of workers might want that to be. Uh, the reality is that for a lot of this AI work, there is a ceiling to the quality of work that can be done, and when you are at an expert level, that quality is obvious, both as something a challenge to use those tools, and then a differentiator for your own expertise.
Yeah, and I'm not making the case that we're not going to see disruption. I think we,
Mhm.
we clearly are. We always do whenever there's a major shift change in technology. We're clearly going to see disruption. I think that and frankly, if I was a graphic designer today, I would be worried. And I think we're going to see what we often see in this, and there's a spread, right? The 80/20 Pareto principle. That if you're the top 20% of your field in any field, you're pretty
Mhm.
much going to be okay because there's always going to be a market for the high end, the luxury, the
Mhm.
more personal, the custom, whatever. It's the 80%, the run of the mill that there's nothing really special or unique about it. Um, that's where the risk always is, right? So,
Mhm.
the question is, can you put yourself first in that first category? Or the second is, how do you then add a human dimension that can't be replicated, at least not easily? And so, I think there's that, but he's talking about this like wholesale destruction of the internet, and I'm not buying that. To me, the more interesting question is, how is this going to change? What are the pieces that are changing? How will it change? Like, I do think the domain name question is probably pretty valid. I think, there was a time where um, where having the right domain name made all the difference. But by the
Mhm.
same token, what did Chat GPT, GTP, hold on, I don't know why I'm subject. Uh, GPT just do? They bought chat.com for how many millions of
Mhm.
dollars, right? So, I think it's going to be this interesting dynamic that we are going to be in for a while of trying to sort out where this shakes out. And it's never as cut and dry or as, destructive as he's painting.
Yeah, and I also think that SEO idea is a little short-sighted in that if we are using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever or Perplexity to look for solutions, the next thing that's going to happen is that we're going to figure out how to optimize for those AI searches, whether that means supporting a certain level of indexing or a certain amount of traffic or whatever it might be. Maybe we are just finding that keywords have to be shifted into prompt based optimization, or maybe we're going to find that we're going to have to play this artificial war of creating artificial traffic to our links that then leads to improved data outcomes or improved search outcomes. There's going to be some way to gamify the system.
Yeah, so here's what I actually hope. So I'm going to give you a non-tech, the opposite end of the spectrum, because I use it for everything. We're preparing one of the things. The old joke is, Mexicans, we make tamales every year, so we have something to open, right? And so my family's always made tamales at Christmas time, and so we're actually planning with my wife's family to do it this year, and so we were like looking at different recipes for scale, because
Mhm.
my grandmother's recipe has like no numbers on it. Just like, well, you get this and get this and
Yes.
get that. It's like, how much? I don't know. Just and so we're trying to look at these recipes for scale. And so I was giving it very specific instructions, my perplexity, of what I was looking for, and it surfaced pretty dead on the right thing, right?
Mhm.
And and I don't think this is anyone gaming the system. What were they doing? They were producing quality content that by having the right level and right quality of content that then was aligned to what I was looking for, it surfaced. And so what I'm actually hoping is that this whole idea of SEO, so maybe the SEO industry goes away in this regard, is that the answer is going to be produce good content. That if you produce good, meaningful, rich content for an audience, when that audience then goes into an AI tool and says, I'm looking for this sort of rich, meaningful content, you surface because that's what you're producing. So we'll see where this all plays out, but I always bristle a little bit when people kind of paint with this very broad brush.
Yeah, but no doubt that the minimum line of uh, the floor has changed from being keyword optimized to community building, and I think that's a respectable goal. If you're counting on people being names, just numbers and keywords, yeah, you're not gonna make it. 5 years from now, this is a time to up your game and to actually be engaging and meaningful to the people that you're trying to talk to.
And perhaps in the not too distant future, that community will be made up not only of actual people, but of AI bots as well.